Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. First things first, guys, before we get into the video, make sure you smash the likes on it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and leave your thoughts in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with anything that has been discussed today. And whilst things on the pitch aren't great for Chelsea at the moment, another loss last night, sitting 10th in the table, there are some positives off the pitch, and the January window is open. Players are coming in, and the latest signing is French centre-back Benoit Badiashile from Monaco, who was in attendance at the Manchester City game last night. He's joined on a 7.5-year contract until June 2030 for about £35 million. So again, one for the future, possibly one that can feature in the second half of the season as well. But I'm delighted to be joined by France-based sports journalist Luke Entwistle for the lowdown on Badiashile, what Chelsea fans can expect, what kind of a player he is. So Luke, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. First things first, before we kind of get into Badiashile himself, how's this move been viewed in France? Are people surprised by it? Was it expected? What's kind of been the reaction to it?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Charlie. I think that in France, it's a bit of a surprise it's happened quite as early as it has. Obviously, he was linked away with a move last summer. That didn't materialise. And I think the expectation was that he would see out one more season at AS Monaco and then move in the summer. So I think the fact that he's moved in January is a little bit of a surprise, especially since the player himself seemed quite keen to kind of accrue that extra year of experience in Ligue 1, because it's easy to forget he is only 21 years old. I think so that's an element that's maybe a bit of a surprise to us in France. Another one is a little bit the fee, and it was the case in the summer that we were talking around about 50 million euros was the rumoured fee. And ultimately, Monaco didn't need to sell because they sold Aurélien Tchouameni to Real Madrid for 80 million, so it wasn't necessary to sell him. And the expectation was that he'd be valued around that once again this winter or in the summer, maybe even more since the summer he has featured for the France national team on 2 occasions. That's a new experience for him. So there was an idea that maybe he would be even more expensive than he was in the summer, so more than that 50 million euros. Ultimately, he's gone for less. I think that's maybe to do with the fact that he's just got 18 months left on his deal. But yeah, I mean, the fee that we're talking about is around 40 million euros. So the price is a little bit of a surprise, and the timing as well, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly, he's a player that's been on Chelsea's radar for a reasonable amount of time. Obviously, kind of the club were interested in getting Josko Gvardiol from Leipzig. Obviously, slightly younger at 20 years of age, had a great World Cup. But Leipzig are hard to deal with. Personal terms wasn't a problem, but the fee, 80, 90 million pounds, it's a lot of money. And perhaps with Badiashile, maybe it represents better value for money for Chelsea, free up more money to go and spend elsewhere. But on Badiashile himself, kind of what's his journey been like? He's obviously 21 years of age, but he has played over 100 games of top flight football. As you say, he's got 2 caps for France now. And I was doing a little bit of research before, and Badiashile is the only player born in the 21st century to have played more than 100 games in the French Ligue 1. So, he's, despite his youth, he's got plenty of experience. Has he just come through the Monaco Academy? What's kind of been his story?
Yes, so came through the Monaco Academy. He's there for it since, very, very young. In his goodbye message, he said, I arrived a child and I leave a man. He really was young when he first arrived at Monaco into that academy. He signed his first professional contract in February 2018 and made his professional debut the same year, a little bit later in that same year. And he was actually given his debut by Thierry Henry, who had his very, very short stint there as Monaco manager, but he was kind of chucked in at the deep end. There were so many injuries. It's a little bit like Chelsea. Maybe there's a few parallels to be drawn, but Thierry Henry at the time had lots and lots of injuries. He kind of threw Badiashile in, and he swam rather than sank. And since it's been a very upward trajectory, as you say, over 100 appearances, 135 appearances as a centre back before the age of 22 is an incredible amount of games to be playing, especially when you take into account the fact that centre-backs don't really peak until their mid-late 20s. So he's very, very far away from the peak of his abilities. So that's quite an incredible amount of experience he's accrued at such a young age. And yeah, during that time, he's played in the Champions League on numerous occasions. He's also worn the captain's armband before the age of 21. So yeah, He's been a very loyal servant to AS Monaco. During the summer, there's lots of talk about him leaving, and there has been for basically the last 2 or 3 years. Manchester United was strongly linked at one point, and that didn't come off. But at no point has he ever agitated for a move, and I think that's a good sign of personality. It's a good trait to have in a player. So I'm sure that he's looking forward to to the challenge at Chelsea, and you know, they've got a very loyal player with a lot of experience who has lots of margin for progression as well.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that he was a player that that famous clip of when he didn't tuck his chair in at the press conference with Henry, and he wasn't best pleased about it. But yeah, I think good characters are really important as well, particularly at Chelsea. You know, he's been guilty of spending a lot of money and perhaps not signing the right characters. Lukaku, a prime example last summer of things that didn't go well at all. So it's really important as well as a player to get the right characters in the door. What sort of a player are Chelsea getting then, Luke? Obviously, in terms of Badiashile's kind of strengths is, you know, what he possesses as a player. I mean, 6'4", his height's an obvious one that stands out. But what else is he good at?
So his profile, he's a very front-footed defender. So I think he shines most in a back three rather than a back four. So, you know, that kind of Chelsea kind of between the two a little bit at the minute. But I would definitely say that the back three is where he shines most because he's an aggressive front foot defender who likes to push into the midfield. And whilst loads of players do push into the midfield but tend to kind of concede fouls, he's a player that manages to win the ball back without doing that. So that's probably his biggest asset is his aggression and the way in which he pushes into that midfield. Usually in a back three, he doesn't do it quite so much in a back four because then he leaves the rest of the defense pretty exposed. Yeah, great header, wins so many of his aerial duels, and that's because, you know, he's just a very, very tall, physically imposing player. So that's part of it. And then he covers the space really well. You know, he's actually quite quick. He's tall. He's not the most physically. He can be pushed off the ball a bit, but he is actually surprisingly quick. And, you know, you find that if he covers a section of the pitch, he can really cover that whole area and cover off kind of attacking runs, which is a big asset. And then on the ball, he is very much the modern centre-back. He is very calm on the ball, has this kind of sweeping pass from the left half space over to the right wing, which on visual inspection I feel as though it doesn't come off that often. But you know, statistically, I'm sure that if he's still being asked to do it, it's because he can pull that pass off. And you know, he probably does it more than I think. But that's a good ball for kind of stretching the play. And then yeah, he has a really good connection with Caio Henrique at left wing back at Monaco, who he managed to find very often. And Caio Henrique is actually Monaco's most creative outlet. You know, more so than any of the attacking players, and that's from left wing back. So he's really calm and can really kind of instigate those attacks, despite being quite quick. And you know, the comparisons are natural, I'd say. He's not the Rudiger type who likes to carry the ball necessarily. It's something that he could maybe be training to do a little bit more, and he should maybe be encouraged to do it a bit more because he's got the physical attributes to do it. But he's not a massive carrier of the ball at this age. But you know, only 21, so very far from the finished product.
Yeah, for sure. As you say, you know, 21 years of age, there's a lot of development there still to come. Obviously, we can't kind of just big him up and not talk about potentially any weaknesses because obviously with all players, there are, particularly with young players. I mean, in terms of perhaps things that need improvement, I guess with a lot of young defenders, I guess it's perhaps the same for Badiashile, is that probably decision-making is an area that needs to improve. What else would you say kind of needs to improve in his game if he's going to make that step up to Chelsea?
Yeah, I think Ligue 1 has become a very physical division over the past few years, but I do think that he does need to be a slightly more physical. I see him push off the ball sometimes a little bit too easily. So that is a bit of a problem that he needs to work on, and I'm sure it's something that Chelsea have identified as an area of weakness and that they're going to work on with him. Yeah, young player switching off sometimes. You know, sometimes when the ball's in the box, it's a bit of pinball. You can see him kind of switching off and he's staring at the ball almost. You know, it doesn't happen too often, but like all young players, you kind of susceptible to the odd lapse in concentration, and that's something that, yeah, you could certainly work on. I think decision making is generally good. I think that decision making within a back four is very different to decision making in a back three, and this is the main distinction I think that needs to be drawn. I think that in a back three, he'll actually slot in and look relatively natural quite quickly. I think within a back four, there's a bit of work to be done because you don't necessarily get the best out of him in terms of he's a front foot defender, and you can't really be that necessarily in a back four. So yeah, it depends on the system that Chelsea kind of move forward with, or whether they kind of keep flitting between the two. But yeah, I think that decision making within the back four, knowing when to be aggressive, know when to stand off and just hold your position, I think is something that you can probably work on. But yeah, very dependent on the exact instructions that he's given by Graham Potter.
I mean, he's obviously had a great career so far in terms of, you know, amount of games he's played for his age and whatnot. 2 caps for France. playing in a decent Monaco side at the moment. Do you think he's got what it takes to make that step up to Chelsea, to kind of establish himself as a good Premier League player, as a regular over the next kind of 12 to 18 months? Because ultimately Chelsea will be looking at it, it's a 7.5-year contract, which is a huge investment. Obviously, we kind of know that contracts don't necessarily mean a lot in football these days, but it's a huge investment in him. And he's, with a view to him obviously playing a large part in the future once the likes of Thiago Silva eventually move on, when Koulibaly moves on, etc. Do you think he's got what it takes to make himself a success in the Premier League?
Yeah, so I don't think he's a Malang Sarr type, or looking for a reference from a different club, or William Saliba type, who is going to have to come to the Premier League and then be loaned back out. I don't think that's the case with him. I do think he's someone who should get a decent amount of game time between now and the end of the season, and I think that how he adapts this season naturally really affects how he does next season. So I think that if he gets a good amount of minutes under his belt, he gets relatively well integrated. I think that you can say next season that, especially if they're going for a back three, that Badiashile will be the starter. It just depends how he's adapted, how quickly he's integrated, and how quickly he's thrown into that starting lineup. But as we say, I mean, these kind of transfers don't happen within a bubble, and there is a context at Chelsea that could accelerate his whole adaptation and his whole integration, because I think ideally he would be someone who was used relatively sparingly from between now and the end of the season. But I think that the needs of the team will dictate that he features a lot more. He is fit at the minute. He has been playing. He was on the bench for the return match of Ligue 1 just after Christmas. Wasn't for the game after because of the imminent completion of his move to Chelsea. But he is in perfect, fully fit, ready to go, and I expect within a couple of weeks he'll be kind of thrown in there. And I think that given how he's really thrust into the limelight when he first made his debut, and he thrived on that, I can definitely see him doing the same again at Chelsea.
No, I mean, that's obviously, yeah. I mean, I guess it'd be a big plus for a young defender as well to be kind of learning day in, day out from the likes of Thiago Silva, Koulibaly to an extent as well, even Azpilicueta, experienced professionals, obviously not the same position, but you can still pick up a lot of things from these players. Just to round out, Luke, I know it's hard to tell right now, but like on paper per se, do you rate this as a good move for Chelsea, like a smart piece of business?
Yeah, so it's easy to rate a piece of transfer business based on the fee that's been paid, which is maybe not the best metric, but I do think that the price is really, really good. I think that getting him for basically £35 million, there or thereabouts, I think that's really good value for money in today's market. And I think getting it sorted before the summer transfer window is a massive thing as well, because I think you would have got a bit of a bidding war starting, the price would have gone up and up and up. So despite the fact he's got 6 months left in his contract, you never know. Monaco may have ended up getting at least 35 million again, if not slightly more. I think, the value is good. I think that it depends a lot on the evolution of Chelsea's style of play and their exact tactics. But if Chelsea are going to be moving forward with a back three, it feels intelligent to have bought a player of that profile and of that age, who you could definitely see him being in that team for a decade. I mean, his contract basically covers that, doesn't it? But I think that it's a good piece of business. The price makes it look better, and that I think that all things being well, you've got a defender there who's going to stick around for quite a few years and be a good part of that back line.
No, I'm certainly looking forward to kind of seeing how he gets on. The game against Man City in the Cup at the weekend is probably going to be too early for him. But yeah, it's exciting times at Chelsea. Youngsters coming in, planning for the future. We've got to celebrate what we can whilst things aren't going so well. Luke, thank you so much for your time, mate. Really appreciate it. Great insight. If people want to kind of check out more of what you do and everything like that, best place for them to go.
So yeah, my @ on Twitter is just @LukeEnsel, like my name. And then I'm on Get French Football News, doing features, and Monaco Life as well. And you can also hear me on the Ligue 1 official podcast, Le Beau Jeu. And that's every Monday.
Perfect, guys. I'll link all that in the description below, so make sure you go and check all of those things out. But yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I'll catch you again in another video soon.
Thank you.